There is a sentence I have heard so many times that it almost sounds normal now. I know we have enough money, so why does it feel like we're running out? The first time someone said that to me, I assumed they had maybe $100,000 saved. Maybe less. They didn't. They had just crossed $1 million. 1 million. No debt. House paid off. Two pensions. Social security. A healthy investment portfolio. And yet every time they went out to dinner, they ordered the cheaper entree. Every vacation became an argument. Every unexpected expense felt like a financial emergency. They weren't broke, but they felt broke. And if you're approaching retirement, or you're already there, there's a good chance you've experienced some version of that feeling yourself. Because the biggest financial problem facing retirees today isn't always running out of money, it's believing you're about to. And that fear quietly changes everything. It changes how you spend, how you travel, how you help your children, how you enjoy your grandchildren, even how well you sleep at night. Today, I want to show you why this happens, because it has almost nothing to do with how much money you actually have, and almost everything to do with how your brain starts seeing money the moment your paycheck disappears. Before we get into the psychology, let me introduce you to someone we'll call Robert. Robert is a composite based on several real retirement cases, with details changed for privacy, but the financial situation is remarkably common. Robert retired at 66 after 38 years as an electrical engineer. His wife, Linda, had been a school administrator. Together, they had done everything people tell you to do. They bought a modest house in the late 80s, paid it off early, maxed out retirement contributions whenever they could, avoided debt, rarely took expensive vacations, never owned luxury cars. By the time Robert retired, their numbers looked almost perfect. Their home was worth around $650,000. Their investment accounts had just over $1.1 million. Both qualified for Social Security. Linda had a small pension. If you asked almost anyone whether Robert and Linda were financially secure, the answer would be immediate. Of course they were. So why did Robert begin checking his investment accounts 6, sometimes 7 times every single day? Why did he stop replacing things around the house that obviously needed replacing? Why did he cancel a vacation they had planned for nearly 15 years? Because every purchase suddenly felt irreversible. When you're working, money has a rhythm. Income arrives, bills leave, next paycheck comes, the cycle repeats. But retirement breaks that rhythm forever. For the first time since you were probably 16 years old, money starts moving in only one direction: out. That single psychological shift changes how almost every retiree experiences wealth. Here's something fascinating. During your working years, your investments were growing in the background. Market drops didn't feel permanent because another paycheck was already coming. Every 2 weeks, you were buying more investments, building more wealth. Time was working with you. Retirement reverses the equation. Now, market drops happen while you're taking money out. Now, every withdrawal feels like you're shrinking something that took decades to build. Suddenly, the account doesn't feel like freedom. It feels fragile, even if it's worth $1 million. This has a name in behavioral finance: loss aversion. Researchers have consistently found that psychologically, people tend to experience the pain of losing money more intensely than the pleasure of gaining the same amount, which means withdrawing $20,000 from your retirement account often feels emotionally worse than earning $20,000 ever felt good. Think about that for a second. You spent 40 years dreaming about retirement. Then retirement arrives, and the very thing you spent 40 years building becomes something you're afraid to use. Now let's go back to Robert. About 8 months into retirement, his daughter invited the family on a trip to Yellowstone National Park. She wanted everyone together while the grandchildren were still young enough to enjoy it. The total cost for Robert and Linda would have been about $8,000. Hotels, flights, rental car, meals. It wasn't cheap, but it also wasn't financially irresponsible. Not for someone with their level of assets. Robert opened his spreadsheet, ran projections, closed the spreadsheet, opened it again the next day, changed assumptions, adjusted inflation, changed market returns, added healthcare costs, reduced market returns again. Then he called his daughter. "We're going to sit this one out." His daughter understood. She assumed maybe money had become tight. It hadn't. Months later, Robert admitted something that surprised even his financial planner. I wasn't afraid of spending $8,000. I was afraid of spending the first 8,000. That sentence explains more about retirement than almost any investment strategy ever could, because the first withdrawal changes your identity. You're no longer someone building wealth, you're someone consuming it, even if the math says you'll never run out. And here's where things become even more dangerous. The fear doesn't stay inside your bank account, it begins changing your life. Retirees delay seeing friends because restaurants cost money. They postpone replacing unsafe roofs. They skip family vacations. They hesitate to help children during emergencies. Some even avoid necessary health care because every bill feels like another crack in the foundation. Ironically, many of these same retirees eventually pass away having spent only a fraction of the money they spent decades sacrificing to save. Their children inherit large portfolios. Their grandchildren inherit healthy investment accounts. But the people who actually earned that money never fully enjoyed the freedom it was supposed to create. And that raises a difficult question. If you never feel financially safe enough to use the money you saved, did the money ever really buy you financial freedom? Or did it simply become another thing you were responsible for protecting? There is a phrase financial planners sometimes use that rarely makes it into retirement commercials. They call it the retirement spending smile. It describes a pattern that has shown up repeatedly in retirement research. Most retirees do not steadily increase their spending throughout retirement. In fact, many spend the most during the early go-go years, gradually spend less during the slower slow-go years, and then spending often rises again later because of healthcare and long-term care costs. That pattern surprises people, because before retirement, many assume they'll spend the same amount every year until they die. Most don't. But Robert didn't know that. In his mind, every dollar spent at age 67 was one less dollar available at age 87. Every vacation became 20 years of future calculations. Every dinner out became another line on a spreadsheet. His financial planner noticed something unusual during their annual review. The portfolio wasn't shrinking because of market losses. It wasn't shrinking because of reckless spending. It was barely shrinking at all. Robert and Linda were withdrawing far less than they had planned before retirement. The planner looked at them and asked a simple question. When was the last time you did something just because you wanted to? Robert laughed. Not because it was funny, because he couldn't remember. Here is where many retirees accidentally create a second career. The first career was earning money. The second career becomes protecting money. Every news headline feels personal. The market falls 3%. The economy slows. Inflation rises. Healthcare costs increase. Each headline reinforces one thought. I'd better not spend. That creates an invisible cycle. The less you spend, the more comfortable your account balance becomes. The more comfortable your account becomes, the harder it feels to spend anything from it. The account stops being a tool. It becomes a score. And once money becomes a score instead of a resource, the goal quietly changes. Instead of asking, how can this money improve my life? You begin asking, how can I make sure this number never gets smaller? Those are completely different lives. Now, none of this means retirees should spend carelessly. Far from it. Longevity matters. Healthcare matters. Unexpected expenses matter. But there is an important difference between planning for uncertainty and living as though disaster is guaranteed. That distinction is where many retirees lose years they can never get back. Because retirement is not just a financial transition. It is an identity transition. For 40 years, your value may have been measured by productivity. Then one day, productivity disappears. The paycheck stops, the promotions stop, the annual raises stop, and for the first time, your savings become your paycheck. That feels backwards. You spent decades being rewarded for adding to your accounts. Now you're expected to succeed by slowly reducing them. Your brain was never trained for that. Robert's turning point came from something unexpectedly small. Not a market rally, not a new investment, not a tax strategy. His grandson asked him one question. Grandpa, why don't you ever come with us anymore? Robert later admitted that the question stayed with him for weeks. Not because it made him feel guilty, because it made him realize what he was actually protecting. He wasn't protecting money anymore. He was protecting an idea. The idea that no matter what happened, his account should always feel untouched. But untouched by whom? He had spent nearly 4 decades telling himself that one day he would enjoy the freedom his savings created. That day had finally arrived, and he had accidentally become the person standing in his own way. A month later, Robert and Linda booked the Yellowstone trip. Then something interesting happened. Nothing. The portfolio didn't collapse. The market didn't punish them. Their retirement plan didn't suddenly fail. Life simply continued. Except this time, they were in the family photographs. Years later, Robert would say that those pictures became some of his most valuable possessions. Not because of where they were taken, because they almost didn't exist. There is another side to this conversation that rarely gets discussed. Many retirees eventually leave behind far more money than they ever expected. Sometimes that is intentional. Often it isn't. It happens because fear quietly replaced purpose. They denied themselves experiences, delayed meaningful purchases, skipped moments with family, not because they couldn't afford them, but because spending had become emotionally uncomfortable. Money accumulated, time did not. And unlike an investment portfolio, time has no recovery strategy. There is no bear market rebound for missed birthdays, no compound interest on postponed vacations, no second chance to take your grandchildren somewhere while they are still young enough to hold your hand. So, what is the lesson? It isn't that everyone with $1 million is wealthy. $1 million means very different things depending on where you live, your health, your family, inflation, taxes, and your goals. Nor is the lesson that everyone should spend more. The lesson is much simpler. Retirement planning is not only about accumulating enough money, it is about learning how to give yourself permission to use the money you accumulated for the purpose you accumulated it. Those are two completely different skills. Most people spend 40 years mastering the first. Almost nobody teaches the second. If today's video made you think differently about retirement, share it with someone who is always saying, "We're fine. Let's just not spend it." They may not need another investment strategy. They may need permission to enjoy the life they already worked so hard to build. I'm Chase Longwell. Thank you for watching. And remember this, the richest retiree is not always the one who dies with the largest account. Sometimes it's the one who found the courage to turn decades of careful saving into decades of meaningful living. I'll see you in the next one.